beba moditana. Ashe.
Ashe. Thank you, Elder Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And Kwame, I see Elder Greg has come on, just so you know who is also here.
Baba Greg.
I'll turn it over to you and Hatim, and I'll just be in the background letting folks in.
So, permission to speak?
Yeah,
I'd like to begin with a Hetepti Nasu. Hetepti Nasu, Dief Peret Kuru, Ketnabet Neferet Wabet, in Cayenne, in Maki. And today, we'd like to honor Baba Ranoko Rashidi, Baba Ranoko Rashidi, Baba Ranoko Rashidi, Ma'akaru.
Ashe.
Brother Hatim, were you able to reach to
Yeah, he should be in a second.
All right.
And
so
Mondevo Kelsey also came on, guys.
What's happening, bro?
Let me get a full screen here. All right, I see him. Well, I don't see him. How you doing, bro? Let's go and start without the other folks. We got Sister Reba in the house once again. How you doing, Miss Reba?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. So,
if you don't mind, bro, just one moment, because I'd really like to hear Brother Mandebo's voice. It's been a minute. You know what I'm saying?
I feel you.
If possible, Brother
Mandebo.
Family.
What's happening, man?
Good to see everybody. We got a little bit of background noise, so I'm going to mute. But great to see the family.
Good. Good to have you, bro.
Yes, sir.
One love. All right, bro. Go ahead. Take it away.
So, the topic for this year was told to me as healthy, wealthy, and wise. Am I correct? We still on that?
Yes, sir.
Healthy, wealthy, and wise. And we had an excellent discussion with Sister Reba last year about healthy, wealthy, and wise. But let's start off right here. Have you come up with any other deep thoughts about this subject since the last time we talked? Because you laid it out last time. All right,
But first, may I have permission from the elders to speak? Okay, thank you. So, well, since we last talked, there are a number of things that I've thought about, and that we have talked about in the family. I know some things too that have been experienced in the Tawi family related to healthy, wealthy, and wise. And we talked a lot last year about the basics of health. Kind of what are the components of health? How do we take care of our bodies? How do we really apply the fact that true health means oneness of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, or mind, body, and spirit. And so, really one of the things that I've really been thinking about is how we truly apply that when we are interacting with each other. And one of the things that becomes very important is our relationships in the family with each other, and even on those levels, specifically of health, the physical, where we, are we keeping each other accountable and holding ourselves accountable to eating healthy, and to exercising regularly, and to getting proper sleep, and to minimizing substances, and to all of those kinds of things that we know are important for us to do. So, I guess part of that is thinking back to putting it back on ourselves to say, how are we making that real in our own lives, and how are we helping each other, helping to hold each other accountable as it relates to as it relates to kind of the way that we bring information in and process that information and decide whether it's toxic or whether it's something that is going to be meaningful and help us to grow. How are we doing that and operationalizing that within our relationships, with each other, and as we work together in community. And then, and that's something that is discussed in the book that we focused on last year, Elder Kelsey's book, Being Healthy and Wealthy. And then also it's talked about in Pyramids of Power, by Dr. John Chazelle, where he speaks about, where he speaks a lot about that in terms of how we process our everything that we bring in, and how do we determine if this is going to be good for us as the individual and as the collective, and decide for those things that are not going to be good to us to put them aside. Now, does that mean that in an exchange, and even part of that too is being aware and noticing the way that it is affecting us, the way we're feeling in those moments. So if we're in an exchange with a brother or a sister, and there are, we're noticing that the emotion that is being evoked is one that may not be the most positive one, then to explore that, like what does that, why is that? Is it that what the person is saying is not true? Is it that what the person is saying is true, but it's not resonating with me because of something that perhaps I have been doing that's not at ease, that perhaps needs to be corrected? Is this more really a matter of us being able to talk and engage and exchange and understand each other better, and just as we talked about last year, at the center, what is good for the whole, what is good for African people, and making sure that if we decide that that is our central objective, is what's going to be good for African people, then everything becomes interrogated and explored based upon that. So then that kind of helps us to then put aside those things that are so ego driven, but think more along the lines of those things that are going to be good for the whole. And so with that, we think of health then outside of just the individual, but what the health of the community is. And so those are just kind of some of the things that I've been thinking about, and we can talk more about that. But those were some things. And I see you want to ask a question for that.
Yeah, because now check this out, because you might have just opened up a whole new field. How do you monitor, like with being a doctor, there are certain signs that you can look at in an individual to know whether an individual is healthy or not, regardless of what they say to you. They don't have to speak to you. You could take their pulse, you could take their temperature, and you'll know they're not well.
Study their stool, look at their tongue.
Right. It's a whole bunch of different ways. How do we...
Their breath, their eyes.
Is there some way that we can check the health of a community? Is there? I mean, are there some signs that we can look at to start looking at the health of the community?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think there are a few things to look at in terms of the health of the community. Is there a common understanding or a common agreement on the objectives? So what, in terms of what does the community recognize are the things that are important to it? And is the community using that common understanding to, as the litmus test, so to speak, for any discord that may be coming about? So kind of to help to determine if that's, kind of how you address those things. Within a community, is there the proper placement of the people at the various stages? So, we talked, and it's spelled out very, very clearly, what the stages of the Watoto, and then you've got your then you've got your warriors and your nation builders, and you've got your elders. And so at each of those levels, are the people who are in each of those groups able to carry out their purpose from within that group? So if you have elders who are doing the work of the nation builders, that's problematic. And so, if we recognize that the elders are the keepers of the wisdom, the elders are the ones who are, are part of their goal is to be where they're reaching kind of the height of their spiritual selves, and using that as to provide that wisdom and guidance. Is that being taken into account? Is the community honoring and respecting that? Are we working with our warriors and working with them to make sure that they are doing the proper development of body? They're at the stage of life when they are physically very strong, but then are we also beginning to make sure that they are placing that physical strength in the proper context by helping to make sure that they are exercising discipline and are thinking about, kind of developing themselves spiritually and being able to prepare themselves then for the next stage. So it's looking at, those, within a community, are people operating from within those various stages? And then do you see movement, kind of positive movement in the various areas of life? So where we're talking about, have ways that we can develop ourselves physically, educationally, spiritually. So are there mechanisms, structures within institutions, within a community that allows for that full development? So those are just some of the things. And of course, we can talk, I'm sure among the group that there are others that we can talk about, but those are certainly some that can be used to determine the health of a community.
Good. Now, because you spoke about objectives, let's just, what, and Taiwan is here. Come up on camera. Stop hiding. I see you out there. You want to, you come up on that camera, because you get in this too. You said there should be common objectives. Now, because one of the problems that I see and I run into a lot is that there's this thing that we all agree on called common sense. But it appears that it's not as common because we all coming from different places. I mean, I don't know. Am I making sense? Because it's like we agree on the objective, but I don't think, are we really agreeing on objectives in our communities at this point in time? You know what I'm saying? Because we say we want to be free, but free to Brother Hatim might be different than what it means for Kwame, and free might be different than what it means for Reba. And could that cause ailments within the community? Like if we all think we agreeing on something, but we all have different views of it? Taiwan, where you at, man?
Sure. I mean, that can. So, and that's that agreement piece certainly is very important, as we often talk about. And, as Elder Kelsey, of course, has consistently reminds us to do that, the goal is for us to agree to agree. So it's not even so much always that the method has to be the same, because there are several different methods to reaching a common objective. And so, yeah, I got you. So the definition of free may mean different things to different people. But there are some very clear things like, we should be able to grow our own food. So, I mean, whether that means that we are working towards having community gardens, or that where there's some kind of way that we're teaching each other, how to have our own gardens. So whether, those are different ways to make sure, that our basic needs are met. So can we eat? I mean, do we have a way that we can be sustainable and eat? Do we have that? Are we working together towards being being divine, being closer to the divine? So we know that and this again goes back to our interactions and our relationships, that if in the discussion about what the goal is, or what the method towards the goal is, that we're disrespecting each other, then we know that that is not healthy. So, I'm saying that, there's being kind, and actually that's one of the things that Dr. Giselle talks about too in his pyramids of power, about being just as simple as being kind in our speech with each other. And knowing, so in that moment, again, where you start to feel that, emotion, the negative emotion rise, to check that and say, okay, what is that? And that might mean that I have to be a little bit more careful with the words that I'm using, and the way that I'm approaching this situation. It may mean that this emotion that I'm having right now is going to make it a little more difficult for me to hear what somebody else is saying. So I might just need to be quiet for a moment so I can seek better understanding. And so, so that, and I know that doesn't exactly answer your question about, when the definitions of freedom, for example, are different, but it does allow us to get closer to common definitions of those things if we do check ego in those moments. And, and think about kind of what those kind of functionally, what that may look like in terms of our, like I mentioned, our common needs being able to be met from within the community.
You help me. You answered the question, because you helped clarify something, because you said basic needs. I mean, really, that took it there, because if we can, basic needs is something that we all know we got to eat. You know what I'm saying? So when you broke it down like that, that was dope. All right, so now we are in the midst of a pandemic, and you are a doctor, so we have to go on and hit on that real quick. But our institution builder is down here. He still hasn't turned on his camera. I'm trying to see what's going on here. But now, as far as the staying healthy, the emotional piece, during this next phase that we're going into, because last year, about this time, I don't know if they had shut everything down when we was talking. Was everything? I'm trying to remember. Was everything shut down?
It was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
So everything got shut down. We're moving into a whole nother phase, and now we're moving to where now this thing is mutating. Yep. Do you have any words of advice as a physician for the family, as far as dealing with this? Because this is kind of redundant, because you already talked about staying healthy. Because the emotions affect everything that we do, affects how we are able to deal with this virus. But are there any words of encouragement or anything that you could give that you could throw extra on there to give us some extra protection?
Yes. So I'll start with those basic things. Making sure that we're resting, that we're eating well, that we're exercising, that we're fortifying ourselves with our vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D. And some echinacea, and those kinds of things that are helpful. Minimizing stress. We know that there are chemicals that are released in the body when we're stressed that do have negative impacts on our overall health and can reduce our immune system. So we do want to make sure that we are doing all of those things now. And then of course there's still continuing with the hand washing. And I'm saying, too, masking. So I don't care what the CDC is saying, the masks are important. So, if you're the only person in the grocery store wearing a mask, that's all right. Continue to wear the mask. So that's very important. And, I know that there are a lot of many kind of different positions on the vaccine. I can say that from what we've seen so far on the vaccines, that at this point that it's doing more good than harm, and we don't. That's with that being said, that we still don't know the long-term effects, and so there is there's some hesitation that I definitely understand, but we, kind of when you see on the other side of that, and you ask kind of from my lens, having been in hospitals and seen people who were healthy and very highly functional, who either don't make it or do make it out of the hospital, but are not able to function on the same levels that they were before, some not being able to work anymore or what have you. or just with these kind of chronic kidney disease that they didn't have before on dialysis. And so, so there are those kinds
There's an
of
increase
things.
in that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, because that's one of the organs that COVID does affect. I mean, we know about the respiratory part, but it also has an effect on the kidneys. And so we're seeing those as kind of long-term effects of COVID. And so, we can only, from based on what the data and everything that's showing, is that, we know right now that the people now in this current state, this current situation that we're in, that most of the people who are being hospitalized and who are very sick in the hospital, most of the deaths over these last, this last month or six weeks or so have been among people who weren't vaccinated. And so, I wish there was that situation where there was enough of the herd immunity to for it to be protective, but the concern then becomes the exposure to especially these variants that are quite problematic. Part of what you said, where things kind of opened up for a minute, is a part of the problem. With some of the variants that are coming, like say from South America, the Lambda one that there's not been a whole lot of discussion
Wait,
around.
stop. You
but
said,
that's
wait, Lambda.
Yeah,
Wait, hold on,
Lambda.
baby. I
So
was
there's
just talking
another
about.
one. I'm sorry. I know you're talking about the Delta variant right now, but there actually is also a Lambda variant that is showing up in South America, and there's so many people. I mean, think about your social media, the number of people who are living their best lives in South America and places that could potentially be coming back with these other variants. So I'm just saying that right now there's a lot that we are hearing about the Delta variant, but there are more to come. And so, yes,
Wow.
so we have to, I
Oh,
mean,
Now
so
I forget my Greek alphabet, but Lambda is a bit away from Delta.
yeah, I don't think it's all going in order. Yeah, they're
At
kind of,
least 3 to 4 different stages
yeah,
from
yeah,
Delta.
yeah, yeah. So, but
Man.
that's real. I mean, that's very serious. That's something that we do have to take into account when we consider how we're moving about and how we're protecting ourselves.
oh man. Oh.
May I speak?
Please, yes.
Can you?
I would
Can we
like to
see who it
say
is? Can we see? Can we see the picture, please?
I don't have a picture. The variances are to be expected, and you shouldn't be alarmed because the virus is a living organism. All living organisms do the same thing, and that is they fight for their survival, and they will adjust to, accomplish that fact. So
Right.
we should not be surprised about that
That's
at
right.
all. It should be expected.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. And I actually often will give the analogy to even the flu virus. So every season, the flu virus that is there is a different one. It's a mutation from a different one, and they all have names. It's just that with COVID, we're more aware of the different names that are being given to these mutants or variant strains. Because you're right, that's what the virus does. It's going to mutate, it's going to change in order for that virus to continue to exist in the world. And so you're right. So that does happen. And like the flu virus, some are going to be more virulent than others. Some are going to be more contagious than others. From one year to the next, the flu may be worse than that. So that is very true. And so what we are seeing, though, with this particular, and let's also remember that the coronavirus is not new.
Right.
So the issue here is that it's a novel expression of the coronavirus that existed before that is making people a lot more sick. And what the issue is around this current variant, the Delta variant, is that it's a lot more contagious, and that people who may not become sick from it can expose another person who is more susceptible to serious illness. And that is the problem really with this one. But you're absolutely right. It's the variants are going to occur with the virus.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's move it, because I want to move to institution building, Brother Taiwan, institution building. But Sister Reva, please tell us, what is the importance of institutions to people? I mean, we kind of preach to the choir, but I believe that we need to go over stuff over and over and over. What is the importance of institutions?
Yeah, so a number of there's a number of things that are important about institutions. One is that they provide a structure for in which people can operate. And so when we talk about those different, the ages and stages, there should be within institutions places for each, kind of stage within the various generation or the various kind of from an intergenerational standpoint operate. So it creates a structure. But then also we know that institutions also serve. We were talking about before those, what are those goals and objectives? What are our targets? That institutions are developed as vehicles to help us to reach those targets. If we think about, for example, whether we're talking about an educational one, whether we're talking about in the case of, say, the African Center that we all on this call, I think, touched in some way or experienced in some way, had multiple things that it was working on. It was working from an educational front, from an economic front, from a nutritional front with the co-op, a emotional health from some of the groups that started to develop within the African Center, from which APDS then kind of was formed. But if you think about all of those, the institutions are the structures that allow us to move towards our objectives or our common goals. And so if there is space within the institutions for people to operate within, like I said, within those, the stages, then that institution is perpetuated and stays around to continue to move those objectives forward. And as they need to be adjusted based on, changes in time, then that can happen. But that is really the importance of institutions in many ways.
Can we win without institutions?
I don't know. I don't know that we can't, because because the institutions are also those structures through which we organize, the way that we are not kind of running around in a bunch of different directions. Now, what I think needs to happen more is that our institutions need to unite more. So that as we have different African-centered institutions, that they're not working against each other. So I do think that needs to happen. But but institutions are critical to our being able to move forward, to us becoming free, to us becoming liberated. Whatever terminology we want to use, they're essential. I don't think we can win without them. I would like to hear others' thoughts, but I don't think we can win without our institutions.
Hey, this is Brother Taiwan. Good evening or good afternoon, everybody. I would agree 100%, Kelsey, that without institutions, we would have a bunch of array of things happening. And everybody knows that when we come together, the need to come together always works out better because we can do a lot more when we are working together. I also think that, institutions also set the tone and the expectations, and oftentimes people are looking for guidance. And it's not that they're just looking above the system as much as they're looking for something to follow and something to be a part of. And I think institutions allow that to happen by setting expectations and leading people to meeting those expectations.
And you remember too, as African people, it's natural for us to be collective, to work collectively, and and to be in, community, for us to work together. So I think you were going to say
they
something.
Hold that memory as well. They hold
that's
that
right.
memory, so
absolutely,
that
and that's key.
back.
And that is key. Yes, thank you.
So
I have to tell you, I'm trying to be quiet, but it's hard.
Go ahead, come on.
Speak, Baba, speak.
You asked a question about institutions. What we have to do is to make sure that we're really talking about institutions in our way, not in somebody else's way. See, the institution in our way says that you start with that message of having collectivism as the basis of it. And it doesn't separate the physical from the mental from the spiritual. And then we set in other smaller institutions that I think sometimes we call the school or the church or the bank or something else our institution. It's like a checkerboard sitting inside of the larger institution that we should have, that is not based on the European model of this is my institution, my army, my this, my that. It is a small element, and not only that, within that institution, we've got all of our rules, and all of those sub-institutions are following the rules of what is the larger institution, which I was trying to describe in that book that you'll refer to, because I think that it is so important that those elements are honored. Otherwise, we're always in conflict. Even if I don't like what something has happened, then I have to ask myself, what is blocking me from building this overall institution that I know is the foundation for all the other things that we're talking about doing? So I'm saying, I think that the time has come for us to recognize that we need all the small institutions that we define as being important, but they also need to be followed in the larger institution that we're calling the cultural institution in which they sit. When they conflict with the cultural institution in which we sit, then a problem arises, and that's when the collective minds of all the people, from the elders to the pre-warriors, are to be operating to say, let's get this back in order. If you're not doing that, then we're at war with ourselves. Well, I'm not on. I just want to put that in right now.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, and that was good. I mean, because now you open it up to a wider discussion, because we have a doctor, we have a nation builder who is building an institution. And part of the thing that we run into, and I know you was running into it back in the day when you was doing your thing, is trying to hold on to the Africanness of what we're doing. Because and this is to Baba, if you want to jump in, but especially for the panelists, how do we hold on to how we do things in an environment where it is hard to, in a sense, get funding for us being us? Because one of my teachers told me a long time ago, Brother Hatim, they only give you enough money to fail.
That's right. That's right.
They only gonna give you enough, so we got to do what we got to do, but they only gonna give us enough money to fail. So we're gonna have to go a little bit extra. So how do we maintain institutions in a world that, in a sense, is programmed? It's almost like the world is designed to attack anything that.
Oh, hold on just a minute.
Go ahead.
You said in a world. What world?
Uh-oh.
See, then that's where we fall. That's where we fall into trouble. We give them credit for having the world. They don't have the world. There are others who are doing damage to the world that we all sit in. And so we act like, are they the supreme? Then don't make them the supreme. I know what you're talking about when you say the world.
I understand. I mean, but it's good for us to have discussions like this where that could be brought in and reminded, because sometimes we fall into a mind state of them being supreme.
That's right.
You understand what I'm saying? So we have to remind each other in occasions like this and on a daily basis, because we really gonna start having power when we have these kind of conversations within some of these institutions, to remind us. So how do we how do we take our world back? Is that the proper question? Would that be a proper question?
I would like to go back to the question about how do we maintain it. And I would just simply say, once we identify what it is that we want to accomplish, we continue to practice it over and over and over again until we do not get it wrong. And so that's one of the things that I'm attempting to do, is to establish what it is that we want collectively for our children and our future, and begin to practice that with this generation and those who want to continue to help it grow over and over again. I mean, that's what I want to see happen. You know, Millennium Community School being that institution that has decided and will continue to practice over and over and over again what we have decided as a collective that we would like to see for ourselves now and our children the future later. That's how we maintain it.
And thus creating and maintaining our wealth in
Yep.
the human capital that we're developing.
And perhaps also considering that human capital far exceeds fiscal capital. See, I think that we get mixed up when we say they're going to give us enough to fail. Yes, we all know that. So we got to use our human capital to overcome all of that. And I appreciate you saying that, brother.
How do we? So, because that's, how can I put it? That's part of the definition problem that I ran into before, because it's like, that's not common. What you're saying, Baba, is not common sense. How do we take this information and start getting it into generations, whether we're talking about my generation or the generation above me, and especially the generations below us? What are some of the methods that we could use to start getting them to understand? Because even if you go back and look at us traditionally, it was never about money with us. It was always about, as you call it, that human capital. How many people can you call to help you maintain the space and time that you have as a group?
Well, again, I would go back to the idea of, Baba talked about the human capital. I agree 100% with that. And again, going back to, we have to decide first and then create and then practice it over and over again until we create the new majority.
And protect it.
That's right.
You can protest all you want to, but if you don't protect it, then it's doomed for falling down.
Yeah. I mean, protect it and develop it. So, I know that I keep going back to the different stages, but each stage, if operating at the height of what it's supposed to be doing, and is recognizing that part of their role at that stage is to be prepared for the next one, then that actually allows us to continue. So the point that I was making earlier, I wanted to make sure that that it wasn't misunderstood, was when I was talking about if the elders are functioning as nation builders, if that's problematic. What was the implied part of that is that means the nation builders weren't ready to function as nation builders, and that's problematic. So I'm just saying that we have to work to make sure that as we recognize the value of the human capital, that we are developing ourselves and each other so that we are, again, operating at the height of what we should be and are preparing for our next stage so that we can continue to exist and to function as institutions and as a community the way that we should.
So everybody operating in their space and time, where you are.
Well, operating optimally.
Okay, operate, because we are operating, but it's operating optimally and to the best. So, I mean, and I think going back to what Kwame said first, you said when we talked about the institutions, then Kwame said something about maintaining that memory, because you know what I'm saying? Yep. There really is no rites of passage if there's no institutions around it to support that. So building those institutions and building our world and maintaining it through maintaining it with our vision. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is, what are some realistic steps that we could take between next year and between now and next time we meet for this Kemetic New Year to put some things in place, because we have been working, we are making progress, And like Brother Wakesa says, celebrate the small steps. You know what I'm saying? But what are some other steps that we could do to start making sure that those, how can I put it, those institutions, because the reason I wanted to ask the question about the institution was because a lot of times institutions outlive all of us, or at least they're supposed to. APDS will be here long after all of us here as an institution. You understand what I'm saying? Tyree Village will be here long after all of us here. Giame, the goal is for it to be here. Millennium will be here long after that. But how do we leave stamped in his DNA, Ket in, as we say in Giame, our thing? How do we make sure that it maintains being our thing? Did that make sense?
Yeah, you did. You did.
Yeah.
No.
If I might just pipe in just real quickly. One of the major issues that seems to be pervading wherever we are is this inability to come together as Africans whose function may be, let's say schooling, Africans whose function may be, let's say for dare I say, well, let's just say getting a better understanding of African culture. And, you have these different aspects of our Africanity, but for whatever reason, we do not want to support each other, especially where we overlap in interests. And that, I think, is really problematic for one, but it would seem almost like common sense that on these areas where we have common interests, that we pool our resources, thereby helping to develop and maintain relationships that will strengthen the institutions that we have and build institutions for tomorrow. I yield.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, and that's part of what I was getting at when we were talking about the various institutions that will kind of work against each other rather than working together, or not even necessarily against each other, but not in a way that is collective. Kind of like you said, Brother Kwame, where we recognize that we're doing some of the same things. Why don't we figure out a way to pool our resources and then be stronger and more effective in so doing? So yeah, absolutely. And how do we keep our institutions ours? Was that your question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Because over time we have a tendency to lose some of our institutions. Because at one point in time, the church was a foundation for us, but now it moved from a black ministry and saving black folks to everybody deserves to be rich right now. I guess I don't go to all churches, but a lot of them I'm hearing a lot of prosperity preaching right now. I'm not hearing nothing about what's going on with black folks. You know what I'm saying?
May I speak?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay. It seems as if that we have forgotten where we're at. It's like that, of course, things fail. And that should not be a question of why. We should understand how, because we're in a war. So we are talking about these things as if, well, why don't we have this? But we had these things, they fail because we're in a war. When you're in a war, there are fights. So we are talking about these things as if they function upon their own, as if that, this is what happens, and naturally they grow and they are supposed to, prosper. But they don't, because we're in a war. And unless we start to conceptualize our situation as that we're fighting a war, and that these losses, we have to understand that these are losses because we have not approached the fight of white supremacy from using the right tools. So I tend to get emotional about these things Because, we have these conversations all the time, but sometimes we use euphemisms that are so abstract until it sounds like that we're talking about things, but we're really not talking about anything other than we are in love with the sound of our words. So we have to, I think, be more practical in terms of be more precise in what it is that we are doing. At this point, we are in no position to even conceptualize to build a nation. We're building relationship between each other, because that comes first. Until we can get that nations are, nations, like you were saying, are the result of institutions. We can't even have reasonable relationships between men and women. So without that, without a family, we cannot have, institutions. So I think we need to be more realistic about what it is we need to do and how to do it, and use more terms that are more descriptive. We are fighting these evil white people. And we tend to talk so abstractly that we forget these people are evil. What they're doing to us is evil. And until we deal, I know, okay, I will yield. I made my point.
Well, but not you guys.
Permission to speak. One of the things that I found really or heard was Elder Marimba talk about human capitalism and capital and its importance. And one of the things I think that has kind of eroded is our respect for each other and the stations or the things that each individual can contribute to the institutions. If I can come in and I can sweep the floors and set up the chairs before the meeting, that's just as important as the person who's going to be the main speaker. And I think that, so many of us don't understand. You don't have to have a college education to be able to contribute to the unity of institutions. The other thing that's really important to me is that we find a good, wholesome, nutrient-dense food source, because so many times our communities are food deserts, and people are eating snicks and snacks and whatever, and then when we get a high number of people who have come down with COVID, we're like, well, wonder what happened. Why is it in our area? Maybe it's because you're not eating food, or you don't have access to food that will help your body to fight off this disease. I yield.
Anybody else?
Can I have permission to speak?
Well, they won't.
I think a lot of what's been said is really beautiful and necessary, but part of the comment that was made just recently about institutions, you don't have to have higher education in order to contribute to the institution. The institutions that I've been a part of, I think of education, institutions of education. The prison system is something that I identify with institution, our economic system. But when I think about those, especially the education institution, it's the individuals who don't necessarily have the college degree that, just like you said, do some of the janitorial work or the kitchen work or the mailroom, that make those experiences and help develop our youth and our children and our people, because it tends to be that spirit that cultivates the spirit in us, as opposed to the spirit of elitism that sometimes creeps in to the individuals that hold those college degree positions, such as professor or president or what have you. So sometimes it's not the individual that understands that their role necessarily, or their path isn't to get the college education to be in those positions, but to serve in the way that they were created to serve. I don't think it's as much on them as it is for us who may have been called to get the education and serve in that way, to remember where we come from, and that, like you said, the entire pyramid for all of us are necessary. I hope I articulated that well.
Thanks, sis. Appreciate your input.
Any other input? Questions?
I would just.
Elder Kelsey, I think, was going to say something.
Well, I really don't know that we've had a session that where we had as much interaction as we're having right now, and I really appreciate that. I can tell you that. And the second thing that I want to say in that regard is, I think we need to stop skimming what around the issue and go right to it, and say that what's busting up our unity in Taiwan, and then say that then we ought to say to ourselves, what are we going to do about it? And then we ought to recognize what the problem really is, and not blame anybody else for it, but ourselves, because I think that we have the power. We recognize that the war is going on, and we don't want the war to be inside as well as outside. Sometimes the war inside is worse than the war outside, and so I think that it's really. I'm saying that to us because how do you solve a problem if you don't face it head on? And I hope I'm making sense to you all. And now, I'll soon, as you know, I'm approaching, I'm closer to 100 than I'm 90. and so I would say to you that I'm taking the privilege of being there and saying to you, quit dodging the bullet, face the bullet head on, and say we're gonna make sure that we're not injured from the internal bullets that may be coming, that we might have. Is that clear, or you want me to be clearer?
No, I think permission to speak here. Now, this is Brother Taiwan again. I think you were very clear, Baba. I've actually faced that same question even within my own organization. And one of the things I've come up with is I think we've just lost the idea behind the vision of what we're here for and what the purpose is. And from there, after I decided to recast that vision, piece of it was to reinforce how to help everyone accomplish it. So I think it was almost like a re-education or an ask for a recommitment to that vision. And then, that was just my way of putting things back in order. Now, as it relates to Taiwan Village, I think I would like to think that it's the same way as well, too. Maybe a loss of the purpose here, or maybe a lack of understanding of it or the vision of it, and having people around to support or redirect folk when they are off task.
Permission to speak. This is Cassandra, and I am loving this conversation. This is something that Alona and some others will attest to, because particularly Baba Kelsey, the statement that we have to deal with our issues head on. That's one of the things, and I guess I'm not a new initiate now, huh? It's been a year or whatever. I just wanted to say that I appreciate, because that's what I see. We have to work on our unity. We have to work on our respect for each other. Everything that has been mentioned in the conversation thus far, and we have to do it and not hide behind certain words. Sometimes we have to feel ugly, get ugly, before we can grow and shift into something better. I yield.
Anything else?
Yeah. So I can't help but to tie a couple of ideas in together. One was the idea of institutional memory. And over the past year or so, I came across the idea of Queen Hatshepsut saying that she was of the family of Mentuhotep II. She was 1,000 years removed, damn near, from Mentuhotep II. That's institutional memory, and that's a restoration of institution. And then to deal directly with where we're at as Tawi, Jinyame, and other family members. One of the reasons, and I appreciate you, Sister Reba, for pointing this out, and I will keep reiterating it, and that is where we have these common interests. If we lend ourselves to that common interest to rebuild the relationships, I think that is a beginning step. And I'll stop there for now.
Anybody else? Because I know, come on now. We got to talk. Ain't just often we get to talk.
Well, allow me to add this then, because
okay, go ahead. See, there you
Baba,
go. There you go.
Baba Banachi, and Dua Baba, and I'm glad to hear your voice, reminds us, we're at war. And Baba Kelsey, I'm tying in your interview that you did not too long ago for the veterans, where you talked about this internal war with having to fight off white boys while in the military. And then, to have another war going on outside of that, and how trying that can be. And so, having said all that, I'm emotional about this because I know as a family, and being one of the youngest of 10 children, or second youngest in any event, that you have these squabbles, interfamilial squabbles. And yes, it may take some time to heal. But the one thing I learned from my family is that there will be healing. There's no doubt about that. It may take, 6 months. It may take a year in some cases. And rest assured, that hurt even carries beyond that point. But at the same time, we know what family looks like. We know how family is supposed to feel. And as a brother in this family, I'm constantly reminding my brothers and sisters that we're still family, number one, that we still have many of the same interests, number two, and that what we're up against, if your love for that is greater than your love or excuse me, hate for your brother or sister, then, that's something that you have to deal with. And I'll shut up for now.
Ashe.
Anything else?
Well, I was just listening, and I guess maybe put taking that one step further too, is as it relates to the question that was posed about Tawi specifically. And I don't know all the dynamics, so I can't speak on it, but just as I would give as just kind of a little test as you're thinking about it, is to think about, is Tawi more important, or is getting my way more important? And that's somewhat of a rhetorical question, because I think we probably know the answer to that question. But if you think about that as, okay, is Tawi moving forward and doing the work of Tawi more important, or is my ego more important? And that's, we we have to deal with that. Because I mean, you know, because if it is ego, then that's something that we know we have to work on. And so because that's out of order, so it's an important question to ask. Like in this moment, do I feel like me getting my way is more important than Taiwan? And that could happen, I guess, theoretically. Then maybe we need to kind of take some time to just kind of work on self and think about that. Or kind of step back to just kind of allow things to move for a minute until we can kind of recalibrate and reorient to what's important. Because remember, we're talking about institution. And if we want the institution, and if we know the institutions last and are going to be around long after we are gone, then I think the answer to that question becomes very clear. The way that we carry that out and what we do about it is a little more difficult sometimes. But I think the answer to that question becomes clear.
This is Kwame again. I find with my brothers, and you know, my family likes to talk loud and can become highly emotional, and ain't nothing wrong with that. But I find with my brothers, when we have a strong difference of opinion, that the louder they get, the softer I speak. And as you were suggesting earlier, Sister Reba, I'm very slow to speak, but I'm deliberate with what I'm saying. And then secondly, that's the idea of when I listen to my brother speak, whether it's out of anger or other, you know, whatever our difference might be, I'm looking to hear where I can build the relationship again or rebuild the trust so that he can at least gain some understanding where I'm coming from, and I can get a better understanding of where he's coming from. And we still may have a difference of opinion, but it ain't going to blow us up. You know what I mean? It ain't going to blow the family up. And, you know, I think these are some of the same skills, at least, that I tried to bring to Tawi, that I tried to bring within our Jinyame crew. And, you know, I guess try to use that as a way of life. I yield.
Anybody else? Well,
I don't, not adding to anything, but I have a question. Is this still, is this just a program that we're going through right now? Or is it the basis for a plan for action? In other words, are we just talking? Or are we ready to take action to make sure we have unity beyond what we have right now next year this time?
Permission to speak.
They will.
This is Alona. I want to think of this conversation today as a plan for going forward. I have in the back of my mind some things that I need to do, and I will do them. I think the conversation has been wonderful. I really thank Elder Tony for putting this panel together, which led to this great conversation. And I feel, everybody know I'm a big note taker. I've written some real questions down that we need to look at. I want to say this is more than just a conversation on the panel for day 7, for the 5th day of our Kemetic New Year. That this is a plan. There are some things that we need to do, and I will say there are some things that I need to do. and I will do them. I'm calling you, Hatim. Okay? I'm calling you, Hatim. We will talk. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Permission to speak. This is I see it also as a plan. It's a plan for moving forward. And that's why I said I appreciate this conversation big time. I have to admit that yesterday I was feeling kind of down because it's like, okay, we're not really, we talked about where we were going, what was happening for the year, the Kemetic New Year, but I did not hear the plan for moving forward. And so now, since not everyone has heard this, but everyone who is a part and want to be active in moving forward, now I think we have a little more juice to do that. I yield.
Permission to speak. And this is Kwame. And maybe I'm just too overly optimistic, or I just believe too strongly in the principles on which I stand. And that is, I'm saying that we've been working on this. This did not just come about because of today. Today it's a point along the path to where we need to get to. But we've been working on this under your guys, Mama Cassandra, Baba Tony, Sister Tiandra, who was online, Mama Isatu. We've been working on this. Elder Alona, Baba Greg, Elder Phyllis, we've been working on this. We had differences of opinion, but our point is to find the points on which we can work together and make it happen. I yield.
Is this a comfortable silence or an uncomfortable silence?
Well, my point is that if you want to talk about quantum physics, yeah, it seems like things just seem to pop out of out of nothing.
Right.
But there is a transition into how things get from one point to the next. And because we don't necessarily follow those points, we seem to think that things seem to just pop out of nowhere.
Everything has a purpose.
This has been in the works. I'll shut up.
For growth, let me ask a question. Anybody can answer. Is growth a smooth thing? Can growth happen without conflict? I'm throwing it out for anybody out there.
It can, but sometimes it also happens through some conflict. Sometimes there are bumps in the road. So, yes, it can happen without conflict, but we recognize that sometimes there's also some pain and growth that can happen.
And the thing about the pain and the bumps in the road is that it often pushes that growth, because one then has to call upon the creative energy to figure out ways, whether it be for themselves, how they behave or whatever, or their thinking, to overcome whatever issue it is. And I also wanted to add, I forgot to say permission to speak, sorry about that. But I also wanted to add, next Saturday we have the intergenerational conversation, which is also a step on our path toward growth. I yield.
Permission.
April.
I used the word or the phrase Ma'at Hetep the other day. And another strong impression that was made on me was when Jehudimus III was going out to do battle. At least the way it was explained to me was that he would go under the banner of, I am going to restore Ma'at. And he had to battle to do that. And so I take that as a lesson that, we got plenty of battles ahead. Let's try to keep them few and far between when dealing within the family. I yield.
Well, Hashim, I want to respond to your question about do we have bumps in the road along the way? I have some collard greens out in the garden, and they're growing pretty well. But one morning I woke up and I saw holes in the leaves. And I said, what in the world is going on? So I had to treat that. Right then, if I didn't treat it right then what's going to happen to the collard?
It's going to get ate up.
That's right. And so it's really important for us to recognize that, because nature teaches us what to do when we face bumps in the road. Sometimes we don't observe what nature teaches us.
Anyone else?
Probably nothing to add so much as to underscore what Brother Kwame just mentioned. And, I talked about those common objectives, but that's really most important, I think, as a way kind of to help to guide us, is that if we remember that as we are moving, everything that we're doing should be with trying to keep Ma'at at the center, and to think about if we are interacting, if we are building in a way that maintains or restores Ma'at, then that can serve as a guide for us. And that may sound abstract, but it's not. I mean, that's very concrete. I mean, either you're operating in accordance with Ma'at or you're not, or we're not. I am not, or just kind of whatever that is. Whoever we are kind of assessing, whether it's a self-assessment or an assessment of the whole, is how can we operate in a way that gets us closer to Ma'at, can be part of the challenge that we make for ourselves or give to ourselves. And not so much the challenge, but just kind of that becomes the barometer.
Sure.
All hearts clear? All minds clear? No questions, comments? If not, we want to thank everybody for showing up for this part of the Kemetic New Year. If I'm correct, it's the 5th day. Am I just the 5th day?
Yes.
Who was born on this day, supposedly? Is this set day?
No, it's Kumbha Day.
I mean,
Push-ups.
I gotta do push-ups? I said it's a set day, not the other one. I'll give you push-ups though.
No,
but which deity was born on this day?
It, man. You alluded to it.
Oh, okay. I got you. I got you. That was good, Kwame. That was good. But I got you. I'll get your push-ups. But family, we want to thank Dr. Reba for showing up. We want to especially thank Dr. Kelsey for being the big doctor. Well, my fault. I can't just say Dr. Kelsey because there's 3 of them on the line. The big Dr. Kelsey. We want to
you say Baba Doc. You call him Baba Doc.
We call him Baba. We also want to thank Brother Taiwan for stepping in. Also, and helping us complete this day. And, giving us a reason to move forward, even though we already had a reason, and even though, because like I said, I'm just reflecting in my mind all of the work that's been going on behind the scenes that I just haven't really been paying attention to. But it led all up to a moment of power. But other than that, if there's nothing else,
Yes, I do.
go ahead.
One more thing. I always shout outs to my study group with Kwame, Joyce, Mary, and our teacher, Banachi. Also, tomorrow at 11:30 for Parank, our guest speaker is Banachi. They're like part of our family. They are our family. So tune in at 11:30 on tomorrow. And thank you for everyone for being on.
Yeah, before you go, I just want to recognize that Ramani has just showed up, and in her picture. Now she might have been listening. I don't know that, but the day is her birthday. Yesterday was her birthday.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Happy birthday. I got one more question. Maybe somebody in the collective can remember this. And was it somebody else, or did Renoka Rashidi stay in Columbus for a little while with and lived here for a minute with Brother Elder Donaldson? Do anybody in the circle remember that, or is that my memory going awry?
No, he had planned to move to Columbus, but he changed his plan. But he had planned to move to Columbus, and I guess he and Elder Donaldson had established a pretty sound relationship. And Elder Donaldson and Nomo were two close friends. I was also his friend, but not as close as they were. So that was his reason for moving to Columbus.
All right. I just wanted to make sure I'm not getting old and losing.
I get old.
What's up, baby? We got a young person in the room. What's going on, young lady?
Good.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Introduce yourself to the family.
Oh, I'm just grilling with my dad.
Introduce yourself. Tell me your name.
Oh, Safina.
How you doing? So
I'm good.
I'm doing well.
I'm doing well.
If there's nothing else, family, I want to thank y'all for showing up. And with that, we say peace.
Peace.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, okay. Now I can take my mama to get her phone. Uh-oh.